And today we will be discussing the power of cognitive reframing in decision making. Why does reframing matter, especially for decision making? Well, because our decisions are heavily influenced by the way we perceive problems and options. It is worth noting that reframing doesn't mean ignoring real problems. If a risk or criticism is real, reframing won't wish it away. Rather, reframing helps you approach it from a calmer, solutions-focused mindset. Think of risk analysis, cost-benefit calculations, pro-con list, etc. as the objective side of decision making. They crunch numbers and logical factors. Cognitive reframing, on the other hand, is the subjective or psychological side. Risk analysis and cost-benefit charts tell your brain what the logical stakes are. Reframing tells your heart how to feel about those stakes in a productive way. Hello and welcome to Clarity to Impact, the show where purpose meets precision. If you're ready to think clearly, lead boldly, and turn vision into measurable results, you're in the right place. I am your host, Blessing Asuko Ekwan. And today, we will be discussing the power of cognitive reframing in decision making. Imagine you're faced with a sudden setback at work, say a project collapse or public criticism. Your heart races and you feel the familiar swell of frustration or panic. What if instead of reacting on autopilot, you could pivot your perspective and see this crisis in a new light? That's cognitive reframing in a nutshell. The mental equivalent of adjusting a camera lens to capture a clearer, more empowering picture. It's about changing how you interpret a situation so you don't change your response. So in this episode, we'll explore how cognitive reframing can transform the way we make decisions under pressure, turning emotional turmoil into clarity. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how reframing stacks up against classic decision-making tools like cost-benefit analysis, and some insightful research nuggets that reveal why reframing works. I'll also leave you with practical takeaways and a reflection exercise so you can start using this skill immediately. Now, what is cognitive reframing and why does it matter? Let's start with a clear definition. Cognitive reframing, sometimes called cognitive restructuring, is a technique for actively changing the way you interpret a situation, experience, or emotion. It means consciously choosing a different frame for the fact in front of you, like swapping out a picture frame to highlight a different part of the image. In practice, reframing involves identifying an initial thought, often a negative or unhelpful one, challenging its accuracy or usefulness, and then replacing it with an alternative perspective that is more constructive. It's not magic or self-delusion. It's about looking at the same reality through a more empowering lens. For example, if your startup pitch gets rejected, your first thought might be, oh, I'm just no good at this. Reframing would have you pause and think, okay, the pitch didn't land this time. What can I learn from this for next time? The facts haven't changed. The pitch failed. But your interpretation shifts from personal defeat to a learning opportunity. Why does reframing matter, especially for decision making? Well, because our decisions are heavily influenced by the way we perceive problems and options. In fact, Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman's research on framing effect shows that people's choices can flip-flop purely based on how the options are framed, that is, gain or loss, even when the outcomes are logically identical. Our perspective can literally alter our decisions. By reframing a scenario, we can reduce irrational bias and emotional clouding, allowing clearer thinking. In modern therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy heavily relies on reframing. It calls it cognitive restructuring to help patients challenge distorted thoughts and reduce stress. Therapists often say it's not the situation, but our thoughts about the situation that affect how we feel. And by changing those thoughts, we can change our feelings. Ancient Stoic philosophers thought similarly. Epictetus thought that our views disturb us more than events. Marcus Aurelius wrote that life is what our thoughts make it, encouraging us to choose thoughts wisely. And in everyday terms, we already know the cliche, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. A general way of saying reframe the problem. Lemons into an opportunity. Reframing is powerful stuff. It can transform stress into motivation, failure into learning, and uncertainty into curiosity. In fact, studies show that using reframing as an emotion regulation strategy can significantly decrease the negative emotional impact of stressful situations. So, cognitive reframing matters because it puts you in the driver's seat of your own mental narrative. When you can do that, you can make better decisions, not out of fear or anger or defeat, but out of insight and even optimism. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds great, but how do I actually do cognitive reframing, especially in the moment when stress hits? Let's break down a simple step-by-step guide for reframing on the spot. One handy summary used by therapists is catch it, check it, change it, which nicely captures the process. Here are the steps. Number one, catch it. Identify your thoughts. The first step is to pause and notice the negative or unhelpful thoughts running through your mind. This requires a bit of mindfulness. You can't reframe what you haven't caught. So when you feel a wave of anxiety or anger in a decision-making moment, mentally hit the brakes and ask, what am I thinking right now? Maybe it's, this project is doomed and it's all my fault, or everyone is going to think I am incompetent. Identify that thought explicitly. Often, these thoughts involve cognitive distortions. Common traps like maybe catastrophizing, black and white thinking, or personalizing blame. By catching the thought, you shine a light on it. For instance, let's say you just received tough feedback from your boss. Your automatic thought might be, I messed up completely. My career is ruined. Recognizing this is the crucial first step. It helps later if you can label the distortion. For example, I am catastrophizing, but even just capturing the raw thought is enough. Now let's move to step two. Check it. Dispute your thoughts. Now that you have the thought in your sight, it's time to challenge its validity. In other words, you play devil's advocate against your own negative emotion or assumption. Ask yourself some reality check questions to test that thought. For instance, what's the evidence for this thought? Am I jumping to conclusions? Is there another way to look at this situation? How would an impartial friend see it? Are my feelings driving this more than facts? This step is about being a skeptic of your own narrative. Let's return to the example we had before. My career is ruined. Checking it, you might recall evidence to the contrary. Maybe this is the first major critic you've gotten, and you've actually been doing well overall. You might ask, is it really all my fault? Or were there external factors? What specifically is ruined? Perhaps my boss giving feedback is actually a sign they believe I can improve, not that I'm hopeless. By interrogating the thought, you often find that it's either exaggerated, one sided, or flat out inaccurate. Here, you pivot from emotional reasoning, I feel like a failure, so I must be one, to evidence based reasoning. This is crucial for reframing because it cracks the rigid shell of your initial perspective, making room for a new one. The third one, change it, replace with a balanced thought. Now we get to the reframing proper. Take that original thought and rewrite it into something more balanced, constructive, or empowering. You're not lying to yourself. You are incorporating the evidence and perspective from step 2 to forge a healthier interpretation. A good reframe will acknowledge reality, but also focus on what can be learned or done. In our example, my career is ruined, could be reframed as this is a setback, but not the end. I've received some tough feedback and now I have a clear idea of what to fix. I can use this experience to grow and come back stronger. Notice, we're not denying that something went wrong. We're simply changing the frame from total disaster to a challenge that can be overcome. Another quick example, imagine you're rushing in the morning and you lock yourself out of the house. The automatic frame, I'm such an idiot. I ruin everything. The reframe thought, okay, I made a silly mistake because I was rushing. It happens. Maybe this is a sign I need to slow down in the morning. I'll figure out how to get back in and build in a spare key plan for next time. You see the difference? We go from self-bashing to problem solving. Reframing isn't about making the situation rosy. It's about empowering yourself to handle it. The goal is to replace unhelpful thoughts with more balanced and realistic alternatives. For example, swap if I fail this job interview, I'll never succeed in my career for I'll prepare as best as I can for this interview so I know I'm showing my best self. And even if it doesn't go well, I can learn from the experience. The situation, a high stakes interview in this case, is the same. But the second framing puts you in a position of proactive control and growth rather than paralyzing fear. These three steps, identify, dispute, and replace, can happen in minutes inside your mind once you get the hang of it. To practice, it can help to write them down in a journal or a note. Draw 3 columns: thoughts, evidence, reframe. But even on the fly, just mentally going through catch it, check it, change it is a powerful habit. The more you do it, the more automatic it becomes. Instead of spiraling into negative thinking under pressure, you'll find you can almost instinctively ask, what another way to look at this? And your mind will start offering options to you instantly. It is worth noting that reframing doesn't mean ignoring real problems. If a risk or criticism is real, reframing won't wish it away. Rather, reframing helps you approach it from a calmer, solutions focused mindset. It takes practice and, yes, patience. At first, your brain might stubbornly cling to the dramatic interpretation. We humans love our drama, but keep at it. As you practice, you'll notice something. Situations that used to derail you emotionally will start to feel more manageable. You'll remember that you've rewritten this script before. Over time, you build resilience. You learn that no initial feeling or thought is the final word. You always have the ability to step back and rewrite the narrative. That's an incredibly freeing realization. Before we move on, I like to point out that sometimes reframing is easier after the heat of the moment. Don't beat yourself up if you can't instantly reframe a huge shock or crisis while it's happening. In high emotion situations, step one might simply be to take a break, breathe, calm down, and then do the reframing exercise an hour later when your head is cooler. That's perfectly fine. The more you practice on small everyday stressors, the better you'll get at doing it quickly when bigger stuff hits. And remember, as you reframe, you're not just changing your mind, you're also changing your brain's response. So, this is a bona fide on the spot tool to navigate tough decisions with a clearer head. We've talked about reframing for personal mindset and daily challenges. Now, let's look at reframing as a leadership tool. How do leaders use reframing to turn setbacks into strategy? This is especially relevant for those of you who are early career professionals or aspiring change makers. Being able to guide your own perspective is great. Being able to help others reframe is a next level skill that can transform teams and organizations. One key way leaders use reframing is by creating a culture where failure is not a dirty word, but a learning word. Tech leaders, startup founders, even military commanders, that effective ones often instill the idea that every setback is data and thus can be seed of a new strategy. They literally reframe failure as a feedback. For example, the concept of failing forward or failing fast in the tech world is essentially reframing mistakes as forward motion. Instead of punishing every failure, smart companies ask, what did we learn from this experiment? How does it guide us to a better approach? A great illustration comes from Pixar Animation Studios. In the early days, Pixar embraced a culture of candid feedback and iterative improvement. Their mantra was be wrong as fast as you can. Why? Because each version of a story that didn't work was an opportunity to find something that does work. Pixar's leadership reframed the inevitable story problems and failed ideas not as embarrassing mistakes, but as integral steps in the creative process. That reframing made teams more likely to take creative risks and ultimately led to groundbreaking films. A leader who says, I expect you to make mistakes and bring them to me so we can learn, is reframing setbacks into strategic advantage. And psychologically, that unleashes people's innovative and problem solving capabilities. Another way leaders leverage reframing is during crisis communications and team morale issues. When something goes wrong, the team looks to its leader for interpretation. Is this the end of the world? Or are we going to be okay? The story a leader tells about a setback often determines whether the team freaks out or rises to the challenge. Take a leadership scenario. A project has failed or the team's big proposal got rejected. A leader skilled in reframing might gather the team and say, this outcome isn't what we hoped for, but let's frame this as valuable intel. We now have clear insight into what our client doesn't want. We're smarter today than we were yesterday. So here's how we'll use this to improve. Compare that to a leader who frames it as, we failed. This is terrible. I'm disappointed in you all. The reframing leader has turned a setback into motivation and strategy. The latter has turned it into blame and fear. Organizational psychologists note that when leaders frame failures as learning opportunities, it fosters psychological safety, a culture where people aren't afraid to speak up, take risk, or admit mistakes. Let's bring a concrete example of a leader reframing a setback publicly. A famous case in the corporate world was IBM in the early 1990s. IBM was losing billions, falling behind in the tech industry. When Lew Gerstner took over as CEO in 1993, he had to rally a demoralized company. He reframed IBM's near-death experience as its burning platform to reinvent itself. Instead of lamenting that IBM's old mainframe business was dying, he framed the challenge as we have a wealth of talent and a legacy of innovation. A setback is proof that the market is changing. So now we must change too, and that's exactly what we'll do. He shifted the narrative from our core business is failing to we're going to take our core strength and pivot to new markets. This strategic reframing energized employees to innovate and led one of the most dramatic turnarounds in business history. Gessler didn't sugarcoat the problem, but he recast it as a call to action rather than a death knell. On a smaller scale, think of any good mentor or manager you've had. When you made a mistake, did they reframe it as, here's an opportunity for you to grow? If so, that person was using cognitive reframing techniques to lead. Great coaches do this all the time with athletes. A loss becomes fuel for the next game. An injury becomes an opportunity to develop mental toughness or study the game from a new angle. Finally, leaders also use reframing in communication to stakeholders. A company facing bad press can reframe the narrative. For instance, when a company faces a public failure or scandal, a leader might respond by saying, we view this setback as our responsibility to fix, and here's how we're going to make it right. Effectively reframing the company as accountable and proactive, rather than playing victim or dodging the blame. This was seen when JetBlue endured a major service breakdown or meltdown in 2007. Passengers were stranded on planes for hours due to an ice storm and operational failures. JetBlue's leadership responded by openly apologizing and introducing a new customer bill of rights. They reframed the debacle as an impetus to set a new standard for customer service in the industry. By saying, we're using this failure to improve industry practices, they turned a PR nightmare into a story of commitment to customers. Reframing setbacks into strategy in this way can not only salvage a situation, but actually enhance leaders' credibility. Because people appreciate honesty and the sense of a constructive path forward. To sum up, effective leaders consistently reinterpret challenges in a purposeful way, not denying the problem, but defining it in a way that points to action or principle. Whether it's an internal setback like a failed project, or an external one like a market shift or PR crisis. Reframing is often the first step in a successful strategy, and research backs this up, that reframing is essential in today's rapidly changing world, enabling leaders to be persuasive, inspire teams, and drive innovation. It reduces the stress of the unknown by turning attention to what can be done. If you're an early career professional or an aspiring change maker, remember that every time you encounter a setback, both you and those around you will take cues from how you describe it. Frame it as the end, and it likely will be. Frame it as the beginning of a new approach, and you open the door to progress. You might be wondering, where does reframing fit alongside traditional decision-making tools like risk analysis or cost-benefit analysis? Are they in conflict? The short answer is, reframing is a complement to those tools, not a replacement. Think of risk analysis, cost-benefit calculations, pro-con list, etc. as the objective side of decision-making. They crunch numbers and logical factors. Cognitive reframing, on the other hand, is the subjective or psychological side. It addresses how we perceive and emotionally react to those numbers and facts. Let's compare reframing with other decision-making tools like risk analysis, cost-benefit analysis, and logic analysis a bit more concretely. Number one, risk analysis versus reframing. Risk analysis is about identifying potential downsides and their likelihood. It's a rational process, but our attitude towards risk is often emotional. This is where reframing comes in. Two people can see the same risk analysis and react differently based on framing. One sees high risk as danger, while another, with a reframed outlook, sees it as a challenge that could bring high reward. Reframing can help ensure you are not exaggerating risk due to fear. Example, if a risk analysis shows a 20% chance of failure, a fearful mind might frame that as doom is likely, whereas reframing might lead you to say 80% chance of success. Those are pretty decent odds. And even in the 20%, we can learn something. Notably, Kahneman's work demonstrated that how risks are framed in terms of loss or gain dramatically affects choices. So reframing consciously can help counteract biases that creep into risk perception. It encourages a balanced view. Yes, acknowledge risk, don't ignore the data, but also frame them in context. Example, relative to potential. It encourages a balanced view. Yes, acknowledge risk, don't ignore the data, but also frame them in context. Example, relative to potential reward or to what can be mitigated. In essence, reframing can make you a more effective user of risk analysis by ensuring your mindset isn't distorting the interpretation of the data. Number two, cost-benefit analysis versus reframing. A cost-benefit analysis lays out the pros and cons in objective terms. However, when it comes time to decide, how you frame those pros and cons can sway your choices. Reframing helps by highlighting different aspects of the cost-benefit ledger. Let's say the costs are high for a certain strategic move, but the potential benefit is transformative. An unframed view might just see high costs, ooh, too scary. A reframed perspective might be, this cost is an investment in our future. The benefit could redefine our business. The facts haven't changed, but the narrative around them has. Conversely, reframing can also prevent over-optimism. Sometimes we downplay cost because we're emotionally attached to an idea. A good reframe might be, let's frame this cost as lessons. Are they telling us something important we're ignoring? In that way, reframing works hand in hand with cost-benefit analysis, ensuring that the meaning we assign to those costs and benefits is rational and aligned with our values. Think of cost-benefit as the what and reframing as the how do we feel or think about that what. Number three, logic analysis versus reframing. Traditional decision tools operate in the realm of logic, but humans operate in logic plus emotion. Reframing is the bridge that connects the two. For example, scenario planning might show you a dire scenario and a rosy scenario. Your emotional reaction might be to fixate on the dire one and panic or ignore it out of denial. Reframing would be stepping back and saying, all right, the worst case scenario looks bad. Instead of panicking, what story can I tell about how we navigate that scenario? Is it a catastrophe or is it tough but survivable with the right strategy? By doing so, you can then use your logical tools more effectively to prepare. Reframing doesn't give you numbers or probabilities, it gives you perspective. It's like the mindset setting that determines how you use the other tools. In practice, a wise decision maker uses both. First, do your analysis, then ask, how else can I view this situation? If your analysis says option A has slightly lower ROI than option B, reframing might make you realize that option A, while lower ROI, could have long-term brand benefits that aren't in the spreadsheet. That is, you frame it as an investment in brand for trust, not just an immediate return. In brief, reframing is not at odds with rational decision-making techniques. It enhances them by ensuring our cognitive and emotional biases are kept in check. It's worth mentioning here that reframing is also a tool to overcome analysis paralysis. Sometimes we have plenty of data from our decision tools, but we're stuck because emotionally we're interpreting that data in a fearful way. Reframing that internal narrative, like saying, even if the choice isn't perfect, I'll gain experience and can adjust course. A decision is not a one-way door forever, can free you to act on the analysis you've done. So think of reframing as the human factor in decision making. Risk analysis and cost benefit charts tell your brain what the logical stakes are. Reframing tells your heart how to feel about those stakes in a productive way. One more angle, reframing can sometimes reveal alternatives that risk or cost benefit analysis might miss. By changing perspective, you might spot a creative third option or a mitigating strategy that a black and white analysis overlooked. In that sense, reframing can actually feed back into the decision process by expanding the solution space. For example, a pure cost benefit might make you think you must choose either option A or B. But a reframed outlook might say, what if we combine A and B in a novel way? Or what if the cost of A could itself be reframed as revenue, maybe by partnering with someone, leading to innovative approaches? To wrap up this comparison, use your analytical tools. They are essential, but always check the frame through which you are viewing their results. The best decision makers marry cold hard analysis with the warm insight of reframing. They look at the data, then step back and ensure their mindset will allow them to act on that data constructively, not fearfully or impulsively. Reframing keeps your decision-making process holistic. It addresses the logical and the psychological dimensions of making choices under uncertainty. As we near the end of this episode, I'll leave you with a short reflection exercise you can try on your own. It's called Reflect and Reframe. Think of a recent situation in your life that brought up negative emotions or a sense of being stuck. It could be anything: a conflict at work, a personal disappointment, a goal that didn't pan out, or even an upcoming challenge that worries you. Write down or mentally note the initial way you've been framing this situation. Be honest about the narrative running in your head. You might write, I didn't get the job I wanted. I'm reframing it as I'm not good enough, a total failure. Or I have to give a speech next week. I'm framing it as this is terrifying. And if I mess up, everyone will think I'm a fraud. Now, apply the 3 steps from earlier. Identify the thoughts, challenge it, then deliberately reframe it. Actually, write out the reframed version or speak it out loud to yourself. Using the examples, you might reframe the job situation as losing that job opportunity hurts, but it's not because I'm worthless. It might not have been the right fit. This is a chance to refine my skills and find a role that values me. I can reach out for feedback and come back stronger. For the speech example, you might reframe it as, yes, I'm nervous, but that's natural. It means I care. This switch is actually an opportunity to share something important. Even if I stumble, I bet most people will empathize. Everyone's been nervous speaking before, so I'll improve for the next time. I might even enjoy parts of it. After reframing, reflect on how the new frame makes you feel. Do you notice a change in your stress level or attitude towards the situation? Does it spark any ideas for action that you didn't see before? For instance, in reframing the job rejection, maybe now you feel more motivated to seek feedback or apply to a different company, whereas before you just wanted to give up. That shift in you is the power of reframing at work. Finally, commit to one small action that reinforces the new frame. It could be as simple as telling a friend or colleague your new perspective. Externalizing it can cement it for you. Or a concrete next step like, I'll sign up for that skill workshop since I'm focusing on growth. Or I'll practice my opening joke for the speech to channel my nerves into preparation. This reflection exercise is something you can do anytime you find yourself wallowing in a negative mindset. It's normal to initially frame things negatively. We all do it. The trick is not to get stuck there. By writing down your thoughts and then rewriting it, you're training your brain in cognitive agility. Over time, you might find you can do this on the fly in your head with smaller issues. It becomes a healthy mental habit. As a closing thought, remember that reframing is not about perfection or not having negative thoughts. It's about progress and emotional flexibility. Life will always throw curveballs. Cognitive reframing is a skill that helps you adapt, stay clear headed, and keep moving towards your goals despite those curveballs. It gives you agency when things feel out of control. In a way, it's a form of everyday empowerment. Your mind isn't just reacting to events, it's actively shaping your experience of those events. As we wrap up, I encourage you to carry this concept with you into the coming week. Notice when you're getting mentally stuck or viewing something through a defeatist lens. Pause and experiment with a reframe. Even if it feels like it's forced at first, give it a try and see what happens. Over time, it will feel very natural, and you'll likely find you bounce back from setbacks faster and make decisions with greater calm and creativity. Thank you for listening to Clarity to Impact. If you found this episode helpful, consider sharing it with a friend or colleague who might benefit from a new perspective. And if you have your own reframing story or a situation you're struggling to reframe, I'd love to hear about it. Feel free to reach out or leave a comment. Until next time, remember, you have the power to choose your perspective. Change the frame and you change the game. Stay clear, stay empowered, and I'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.